Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin, and welcome back to Learning the Spire. Over the last 2 weeks, I've gone into borderline pedantic detail about everything that could be learned before even heading to floor 1. By this point, we know exactly what is in our deck and what is in our way. However, it is practically impossible to beat the entire game with just our starting cards, and it is entirely impossible to get new cards without cracking a few skulls. In this video, I'll be going over the combat encounters of Act 1 from start to finish. This includes what normal enemy encounters you can expect to face, what elites may be in our way, what bosses will attempt to trounce our victory, and how to properly prepare for all of them. Let's begin. Act 1 is all about spending our available hit points as efficiently as possible to make our deck as good as possible. This is best achieved by knowing what cards are best to put in our deck and when. Since cards are the cornerstone of the game, there's no shortage of them to choose from. Cards can be generally split into 4 main areas of influence, with most areas having 3 different duties. These areas include single target, multi-target, block, or draw cards, and each of the single and multi-target cards can either be direct, scaling, or mitigation. On screen, I have a few examples of cards for each character that generally fill these niches. This isn't hard set, however, since there are cards that don't fill any of these roles. Reprogram is a prime example. It doesn't intrinsically deal damage, scale any other damage, block, or draw cards.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Splitting up these card identities makes choosing which cards we need for which encounter less of a hassle. Speaking of, let's start talking encounters. Basic enemy encounters are split into 2 buckets. The first 3 confronted are pulled from an easy bucket, and the remaining are pulled from a hard bucket. These Act 1 easy encounters are designed to be winnable with your starting deck, so we don't need to worry about them too much. These include a fight against the Cultist, Jawworm, 2 Lice, or 2 Slimes. During these fights, however, start thinking about the other possible encounters you could face after these initial ones. Looking at the list of hard encounters, many of them have obvious ways to play them. Of the Act 1 hard encounters, 70% of them are easier with multi-target damage. This tells us right off the bat that if our current path has a good number of encounters, we ought to prioritize taking some of those multi-target damage and mitigation cards. Making these encounters easier will give us access to more card choices, leading to better overall deck quality. Normal enemy encounters aren't the only ones on the menu, however. We also have elite enemies to worry about, and they throw a wrench in things. Looking at our possible elite fights, only one is made better with multi-target damage, the Sentries. Gremlin Nob requires us to either have enough damage to kill him in a few turns, or be able to mitigate damage without playing skills, since his special quirk makes every skill played after turn 1 give Nob +2 strength. Lagavulin forces us to either have a massive amount of damage or have some amount of scaling damage, else face the wrath of -1 strength and dexterity every 3 turns. Don't forget, Lag will be asleep until any damage is dealt to their health or 3 turns pass. Use those turns to set up your scaling damage or powers. With this in mind, only grabbing multi-target damage isn't going to allow us to deal enough to these enemies. If there are elites afoot, we ought to grab at least 1 good source of scaling for Lagavulin, and 1 good source of non-skill based mitigation for Mr. Nob. Either that, or grab a ton of damage right off the bat, whichever one becomes available. As for the Sentries, they go down pretty well to our multi-target damage we picked up previously. Pro tip: if you're playing as Ironclad, grab Feel No Pain if it's offered, since the Sentries will shuffle dazed cards into your deck. Drawing a full hand of these means instead of doing nothing, you'll gain 3 block per dazed drawn instead. It'll make you start wanting to draw them. Finally, we reach the rest on floor 15. Beaten, bloody, and with a pocket full of cards, we know what comes next. The Act 1 boss. We've known which boss it will be since Floor 0 by looking at the unique decal on the top of the map. There are 3 different bosses we could be facing here: the Guardian, Hexaghost, or Slime Boss. Let's go over each individually. The Guardian starts off in attack mode, attempting to block some of the incoming damage on turn 1. Turn 2, all bets are off. A massive 32 damage blow comes rushing towards you. How in the world do you block that? The answer? You don't have to. After taking 35 damage, Guardian will transition to defense mode, gaining 20 block right off the bat and stop attempting to attack you. Turn 1 of defense mode, they will give themselves Sharp Hide 3, making all attack cards you play deal 3 damage back to you. Turn 2, they hit you for 9. Turn 3, they transition back into offense mode and hit you for 8 times 2. Now, the damage needed to cause another transition is up to 45, and will continue increasing by 10 every time you force a transition. This encounter is best won by outscaling Guardian with strength gain, poison, or focus. Hexaghost is potentially the hardest of the Act 1 bosses, yet they seem so docile at first. Turn 1, nothing happens. Turn 2, however, all hell breaks loose, with a massive blow equal to your current HP divided by 12 6 times over. From there, it only gets worse. Every turn after, Hexy will either gain strength and block, or hit you and shuffle burns into your deck. This continues for 6 turns before you're hit for a massive 5x6 Inferno, and all burns in your deck are upgraded. The Hexaghost fight is a face race, through and through. You cannot block for the amount of damage they can deal to you. Chuck everything at your disposal into them, only blocking when it's possible. The last final boss option is the head honcho himself, the Slime Boss. This fight is fairly uninteresting, since the only unique thing about him is his initial phase. He starts by shuffling 3 slimed cards into your deck, skipping a turn, then slamming you with 35 damage. This cycle continues until you bring him down to half of his HP or less. After this, it just becomes a fight against 2 large slimes with HP equal to however much Slime Boss had left before splitting. Multi-target damage will be your best friend when it comes to fighting up to 4 slimes at once. Focus the slimes that are about to hit you, block their damage, and try to get rid of some of the slimed cards when possible. Nothing sucks more in this fight than drawing 5 slimed cards, then getting hit for 20 to 40 damage from all 4 slimes. And there's a complete overview of the combat encounters found in Act 1. This, however, is only 33% of your run. Next episode, we'll be looking at Act 2 in depth, the same as we did today. Warning, it only gets harder and harder as we ascend. If there's anything you'd like me to discuss in more detail about Act 1, or if there's any insights you'd like to contribute, drop it in the comments. If this guide helped you in any way, or if you just enjoyed yourself, consider dropping a like on the video, or subscribing to stay up to date on when these arrive. Following me on Twitch will give you the opportunity to ask me any questions, as well as seeing how I take on the Spire live. Until then, I've been Kevin, and may RNGesus bless you. Good night.